And note that Commissioners Kova, Devon, and Schrader are joining us remotely. So we'll start with a call for motion and second for approval of the minutes of the regular commission meeting of August 9th, 2023.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. The motion carries. And Curtis, we'll turn to you for the executive director's report.
Thank you, Madam President. Good morning, commissioners, employees, and guests. Good to see everyone this morning. I'd like to start this morning with recognition of our safety champions for August. If we could go to the next slide, please. There they are. Janelle, Janine, Chris, and Kelly, all again working to keep themselves and their coworkers and our customers and business partners safe. Just really appreciate them taking the time and energy to go the extra mile to watch out for safety. Some great stories there that we're sharing internally. I in particular want to point out Janine on the navigation team out in the dredge, who did some work to test a dustless, help me out here, Stan, it was a dustless paint remover tool, and got herself in the sealed Tyvek suit. It turned out to be a great tool that we'll be using here in the future. Just some great stories, and I appreciate them for everything that they do for us. So with that, I'm going to ask Steve Danielson. Steve, can you join us for a safety message this morning?
I'm Steve Danielson. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm the Director of Safety, Health, and Loss Control here at the Port. I'm happy to be here to deliver this commission safety message. I'm accountable for the occupational safety and health and wellness of our lean safety department of 5 employees, where we enjoy an injury-free record. That acceptance of accountability is of note. Over the last 9 months, this body has heard all the Port's senior operational leaders that serve on our safety steering team accept their accountability in preserving the safety, health, and wellness of their employees. Powerful to integrate safety into the operations. Today's safety message reflects my team's role while discussing and drilling down on familiar themes that are currently being cascaded down through the organization from the safety steering team. My safety team is responsible, consulted, and informed on safety and health and loss control matters throughout the Port enterprise. We consult with business lines, mobilize to educate, train, investigate, mitigate, and measure safety processes. I have monthly executive team meetings to discuss safety and health maturity, progress, challenges, and metrics. The ET is engaged, takes notes, often offers questions, ideas, and support. And yes, I'll get business line polls for service after sharing of opportunities or slumping leading indicators. Going forward, we'll continue to drive towards safety resiliency through continuous improvements using committed and visible leadership. This monthly forum. Also, 2 weeks ago, monthly safety update was the only business report out on the ET agenda. The Port is big on what and hows. What? As stated in the safety and health policy, employee safety is paramount. It's not a priority because priorities change. How? Safety is our guiding principle, the lens through which we view our work. Let's drill down here. Last month in our safety steering team meeting, I was leading the team through the agenda, and as per normal, early in each fiscal year, we discuss our how, safety as the guiding principle, and what that means. We reviewed the list of safety tenets or beliefs we are committed to, which are on screen now. All occupational injuries and illnesses are preventable. Employee involvement is essential. Management is accountable for preventing injuries. Working safe is a condition of employment. All operating exposures can be safeguarded. Management response matters. Education and training employees to work safely is essential. Learning is vital. Prevention of injuries leads to operational excellence. And we will promote off-the-job safety for our employees and families. The team agreed that understanding and sharing these tenets will further assist integration of our safety management system processes into the business line. So we're doing so. We will continue to monitor our leading indicators on shameless incident reporting and analysis of facts for prescribing corrective actions, hazard reporting enablement to ensure abatement and learning, tracking and correction action plans, closure of safety issues and incidents, all of which serve to elevate and continuously improve our employee safety and health on our journey to zero injuries. Be safe, be healthy, be well. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. As always, really appreciate you and the work you do. I think commissioners, you know how much we rely on Steve for his leadership and guidance. He sort of, I love how you note the engagement with the executive team, because sometimes, well, they're fiery conversations, aren't there? They're interesting. So thank you, Steve. Appreciate your time this morning. Commissioners, a few other items to share. First, on the marine business, some really good news. Daimler will be exporting, excuse me, this month, 75 of their Western Star trucks from Terminal 6 to Australia this week. That's always fun to see. Big rigs manufactured here and sent abroad on vessels calling at Terminal 6. It's the Norden Ocean Carrier, and the operation is going to be managed by Joan Stevedoring. We'll try to get some photos for you. It's always fascinating to see those big rigs on vessels at berth at the Port of Portland. Second, we're really seeing an increase in imports for both Toyotas and GMs. An exciting time on the GM side. Our normal volumes are around 13,000 vehicles in a month, and in August that was 21,000 bound for markets inland. And Toyota is projecting 13,000 imports for September, above their 10,000 monthly average. So some great news there. Toyota has actually agreed to lease 4 acres from our Roberts lot to handle the increase in volume. So really good news. Appreciate our marine team out there really pushing hard for further development of that business. On the property side, you'll remember back in July, we sold the development site at Gresham Vista Business Park to GV5 LLC, which is a partnership between locally owned companies Spec Development and Colas Development Group. Last week, the team broke ground. It looks great out there. It's a very exciting development for Gresham. A 500,000 square foot distribution center is going to be built for Grainger, a business that has met or exceeded all of our requirements around the employer standards set out in the master development agreement. So when completed in 2025, the facility is expected to provide 80 quality jobs, and over time, that number is expected to be 150 quality jobs. Very excited for that opportunity. And then finally, I mentioned to several of you this morning, we had another tour last week. Thank you for executive team members who joined us. Congresswoman DeReamer came out to see the work being done. We do have between 600 and 800 people on site every day. An exciting time out there. Especially noteworthy, the Congresswoman noted the partnership with Hoffman Skanska and the presence of GUTS trailer and program, which is Get Us There Safe, really reflecting Hoffman's commitment to focus on a safe space for mental health. Construction is the second highest industry for suicide in the United States. So it's a real focus for our team. Shout out again to everyone working out there with Hoffman Skanska and really focusing on worker health. So with that, Madam President, I'll conclude my remarks.
Thank you, Curtis. Do we have any questions or comments? Okay, I'll call for a motion and second for approval of the Executive Director's report. Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. The motion carries. We'll move to the public comment period, and we have members of SEIU Local 49 that have requested to address the commission.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Thank you for coming.
Thank you to you. Okay. My name is Leonela Villalobos. I'm sorry, my pronunciation is not very well. I need to translate. Mi nombre es Leonila Villalobos. Trabajo para Harley USA por 2 años. Soy originaria de El Salvador, Centroamérica. Tengo una hija de 20 años y yo apoyo sus estudios. Ella está estudiando contabilidad.
My name is Leonila Villalobos. I've been working for Huntley USA for 2 years. I'm originally from El Salvador, Central America. I have a daughter who I support, and I support her education. She's 20 years old and getting a degree in accounting.
Estoy aquí porque los trabajadores de PDX como yo necesitamos seguro médico. Sufro de von Willebrand desde que nací. Sin seguro médico corro el riesgo de sufrir cáncer.
I'm here today because PDX workers like me need health insurance. I've suffered from von Willebrand disease since birth. Without health insurance, I'm at risk for cancer. I don't have health insurance because, sorry.
No, es okay.
Adelante. I jumped ahead. Go ahead.
No tengo seguro médico porque mi bajo salario en el aeropuerto no me lo puede permitir y no soy la única trabajadora en el aeropuerto.
I don't have health insurance because with my low salary at the airport, I can't afford it. And I'm not the only one at the airport.
Tengo una enfermedad crónica. Me encuentro ahora mismo en una situación en la que si no consigo el tratamiento adecuado, no podría detener la evolución de mi enfermedad. Actualmente no puedo pagar el tratamiento. También sufro de asma y dolores de cabeza crónicos propios de mi enfermedad.
With my chronic illness, I'm in a situation right now where if I can get the right treatment, I could stop the evolution of my sickness, but I cannot currently afford the right treatment. I also suffer from asthma and chronic headaches.
Por otra parte, disfrutamos mucho el trabajo que hacemos. Trabajando en el aeropuerto es fácil contraer enfermedades sin poder decir que provienen del trabajo. Por mi parte, a veces me veo obligada a buscar soluciones médicas afuera de Estados Unidos. Tengo que viajar a México y otros países porque el costo es menor.
We enjoy and like our work very much, but working at an airport, it's easy to pick up illnesses without being able to say that it came from work. For my part, I'm sometimes forced to look for medical solutions outside the US. Because of my medical problems, I have to travel to Mexico and other countries because the cost is lower.
Los tratamientos son muy costosos y no puedo pagarlos aquí.
These treatments exist here, but I cannot pay for them.
Así que hoy estoy aquí para apelar a sus corazones.
So I'm here today to appeal to your hearts.
Los trabajadores aeroportuarios que ustedes representan necesitamos un seguro médico de calidad.
We airport workers that you represent need quality health insurance.
Es vital, es muy importante.
It's vital. It is very important.
En este aeropuerto, PDX está invirtiendo muchos millones en infraestructura, maquinaria y mantenimiento. Y lo que escuchamos que se convertirá en uno de los mejores aeropuertos del país. Mientras tanto, el lado humano, los trabajadores, somos los que movemos a los pasajeros. Y a través de nuestro trabajo, somos la cara del aeropuerto.
Here at PDX Airport, many millions are being invested in infrastructure, machinery, and maintenance. And what we hear is that this will become one of the best airports in the country. Meanwhile, on the human side, we workers, we are the ones who move the passengers. And through our work, we are the face of the airport.
Estamos aquí todos los días, todas las noches, somos la cara del aeropuerto de Portland, de las aerolíneas, de las costanías que nos subcontratan. Creemos que estos rostros deberían verse y sentirse saludables.
We are here every day, every night. We are the face of the Port of Portland, of the airlines, and of the outsourced companies that hire us. We believe that these faces should look and feel healthy.
La necesidad de un seguro médico es vital en un lugar de trabajo como el aeropuerto. Nuestros compañeros resultan lastimados si no tenemos un seguro médico de calidad que esté disponible por nuestro bajo salario. Los trabajadores que empujamos las sillas muchas veces, con mucho esfuerzo, realizamos un servicio que va mucho más allá de nuestro deber como empleados.
The need for health insurance is vital in a workplace like the airport. Our coworkers get hurt and we don't have quality health insurance that is available to us based on our salary. We workers who push the chairs, many times with great effort, we perform a service that goes beyond our duty as employees.
A veces parece que las aerolíneas y compañías no tienen ningún deseo de invertir en nosotros, en las caras del aeropuerto, en las personas que hacen el trabajo en PDX, pero están invirtiendo mucho en infraestructura y maquinaria, tienen dinero para ello, pero no quieren invertir en el lado humano del aeropuerto.
It sometimes feels that the airlines and these companies have no desire to invest in us, in the faces of the airport, the people who do the work at PDX. But they are investing a lot in infrastructure and machinery. They have the money for that, but they don't want to invest in the human side of the airport.
Estoy aquí hoy para pedir que el aeropuerto de Portland garantice que nuestras compañías inviertan en trabajadores de PDX.
I am here today to ask that the Port of Portland ensure that our companies invest in PDX workers.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias a usted, señora Villalobos. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Miriam Noor and I have worked at the airports for 4 years. In my time at PDX, I have worked for most of the wheelchair contractor. I worked for Huntley before, Bags United, and now I work for Prospect for almost a year and a half. And I'm also elected representative for my workers and our team, the bargaining team with our employer. Members of our negotiation team reported for this Port Commission in May as we enter the bargaining team with our employers. And our top priority for this were better protection for breaks and lunches, fair assignment, the right to sit down during shift, and affordable health care, and also paid parking. And all of these are critical improvements because of our employers and of the airline. In any company provide better benefit than other, they run the risk of airline cancellation of their contract. In a favor of contract that will provide the service more cheaply. For this reason, Port of Portland is an action critical to win healthcare for PDX worker. I wanted to share an update about our negotiation. I am happy to report that we have reached an agreement for the fair rules to use time off under the policy of Port to pass last year. This means we have sick time when needed, but we can also use paid time off for vacation or planned time away from work. The top remaining issue that we have on the table at the moment are holiday pay and transportation. This is a simple issue, as I understand most of the airline employee and PDX worker have already paid their employee They also pay for holiday. We are asking to be paid time and a half hours work on Juneteenth and Martin Luther King Jr.'s Day. We are asking for employers to cover the cost of $35 a month for parking. And yesterday the company told us we should ask the port to pay for our parking because the airline won't pay. The airline and our company employer make huge profit. For them, $30 is nothing. This improvement will make a huge difference for PDX worker. I'm here today to share an update for negotiation. We have one more day scheduled for negotiate with the companies. Next week, we hope to reach an agreement with them. We are encouraged by some of our progress, by the news that we heard that Port is developing a healthcare policy. We will be sure to return an update to you as soon as we heard from the employer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. Commission President Corporal Camas and members of the Port Commission, good morning to all of you, and to everybody virtually, good morning. My name is Trevor Marsh. I am currently employed with Bags Inc. here at PDX, and I am a member of the Airport Workers Union, SEIU Local 49. I assist passengers on Alaska Airlines flights. I've been working at PDX now for over 2 years and enjoy working here with a diverse group of coworkers from many different backgrounds. We are a group of dedicated employees providing superior customer service and are a vital component to what makes PDX great, just like the airlines that fly here. We are currently in negotiations for a collective bargaining agreement with our employers. Our employers are contractors for every airline here at PDX. You may not know the names of our companies, but we provide essential service to passengers, whether it is helping with baggage, assisting passengers who require a wheelchair, cleaning the planes, or checking bags at the curbside. We interact with airline passengers every day, but our employers are not the airlines. Today, I want to share with you about a meeting that was scheduled back in August at the Aloft Hotel in Cascade Station between members of Local 49 and representatives from 5 of the largest airlines at the airport here, those being Alaska, American, Delta, Southwest, and United. Our hope was to discuss ways to improve the quality of life for the contracted employees represented by the SEIU. Airport subcontracted workers want to win affordable, comprehensive coverage for our health care, free or reduced employee parking and public transit, paid time off, designated seating for workers to rest and take breaks between missions, and a work environment free of favoritism and excessive hours beyond our scheduled times. Unfortunately, none of the airlines set any representatives to participate at this meeting, which rendered our voices unheard. Our hope today is to bring to your attention, or bring this to your attention, and find a way forward improving communications and a better work environment for contracted employees here at PDX. We know that the airlines ultimately are responsible for many of the working conditions at our airport. Sadly, we've tried to work with them directly, and we were met with no response. We believe that the Port of Portland can ensure that all jobs here at PDX are good jobs. The Port already has improved the paid time off and wages for our PDX workers, and we look forward to continuing to improve standards at PDX with healthcare policy. On behalf of myself and all members of the SEIU Local 49, we thank you for your time and consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, welcome.
Commissioner President, Corporal Comas, and members of the Port Commission. It's good to see you again. I'm Charlene Johnson. I'm a wheelchair attendant at Bags for United Airlines, and I'm here to speak in solidarity with my coworkers. When I last spoke at the Port Commission meeting in May, my coworkers and I were still fighting for our union, a voice on the job, and the right to sit down. I am happy to share that on July 25th, after months of hard work, we won our union with strong supermajority support. We are excited to join our fellow SEIU local members 49 at the airport and celebrate that now. All wheelchair attendants at PDX are union workers and united for good jobs. We've already come a long way together. For starters, we won back our right to sit down and 40 additional hours of paid time off. The port's support for a paid time off policy demonstrates your respect for the hard work we do to make PDX one of the top airports in the country. But we still have a lot of improvements to make, and we aren't done fighting yet. I ended my statement in May by speaking about the importance of healthcare, and that's what I want to emphasize today. I'm glad to hear that the recent news that the port plans to create a policy to expand healthcare access for PDX workers. But as I'm sure you know, the simple option to enroll in health insurance plan is not enough. The healthcare plans our employees currently offer have expensive premiums, high co-pays, high deductibles, and limited coverage for necessary treatment. We don't just need health insurance, we need affordable, high-quality health insurance. A strong healthcare plan will make a huge difference in airport workers' lives. I hope that no one here has been forced to put off medical care because they are worried about the cost. Unfortunately, I know that my fellow wheelchair attendants, baggage handlers, cabin cleaners have had to make choice. One of my coworkers who has worked at PDX for nearly a decade cannot afford the $300 a month it will cost her to get health care insurance through Bags. Recently, she was in severe pain and needed to go to the ER, but since she didn't have insurance, she had to pay out of pocket. Unfortunately, the ER didn't find the root of the problem, and it took her another trip to urgent care, again out of pocket, to finally diagnose the real issue. Now she is left with ongoing pain, a $2,500 bill, and the threat that the hospital will send the bill to collections if she can't pay by next month. She is still showing up for work every day for herself and for her children. This isn't right. This isn't how PDX workers should have to live. I'm here to ask that as the port works towards creating a healthcare policy, you listen to our input. Working together is how we will ensure airport workers get the care they need. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Johnson. I'll just ask the port. I know that I first appreciate the update on the bargaining. It's good to know where we've made gains, and maybe we could have an update on the healthcare policy that's been discussed. That'd be great.
Sure. What I'll do, Madam President, is I'll call on Dan in just a second. I do want to thank everyone who came up. Really appreciate you and everything you do over at PDX to make it a welcoming place, a special place. Appreciate your work. And I know coming in front of commission can be intimidating. So I really appreciate that you came over. And for those of you who didn't speak, thanks for coming and visiting as well. Let me know, we're talking about employees who work primarily for contractors of airlines. The airlines are our tenants. And I would say everyone in this bucket are business partners of ours. So we're trying to navigate with them. We have set a standard around pay and around paid time off. Our team is actively engaged with them currently on healthcare provision and what that might mean, because these are different sizes and natures of companies. We're trying to have a standard that applies fairly and universally. So let me call on Dan Pippinger, our Chief Operating Officer, if there's anything to add. I know it's an active conversation. I don't know that we want to give a detailed update of where all those conversations are, but I know this year you expect to come to some conclusion.
Thanks, Curtis. Good morning, commissioners. And Curtis really covered most of it. We do hope to bring something before commission before the new year. And we're had a very productive meeting this week with SEIU, and we're engaged with the employers as well to think about how to navigate this space and think about healthcare for these airline service provider workers who, as Curtis mentioned, are not direct employees of the airlines or employees of wholly owned subsidiaries, right? They're subcontracted out. So we're working with them and we have a great dialogue going, and I think we'll be able to bring something to you before the new year.
Thank you. That's helpful. Any questions? Please go ahead.
No question, just a comment that I appreciate the work that you're doing to pursue that, because I think if we look at our shared prosperity mission, it's squarely in pursuit of that. So appreciate all of you who came here to testify, and appreciate the work the port is doing to pursue a reasonable solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Luther. Any other comments? Okay, thank you very much, everybody, for attending. We'll move on to the consent agenda. We have one consent item, and I'll ask if any commissioner wants a presentation of the consent item. I'll read the title. It is the City of Portland Enterprise Zone Amendment. Okay, seeing none, I'll call for motion and second for approval of the consent item. Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The motion carries. We have several action items. The first, I'll call on Stan Waters to introduce it.
Morning, Commissioners. This first action item requests your approval to grant an exemption from competitive bidding requirements so that port staff can pursue an alternative contracting method for the South Terminal Heating System Upgrade Project. As you know, our standard method of selecting contractors for public improvements is via a competitive low bid process. However, under Oregon's contracting code, we can seek an alternative contracting method and can use that method if we issue a request to our contract review board, which you are that as well as our commission. So that's what we're here for today. This project, port engineering, procurement, and the legal staff all teamed up to analyze the benefits of using an alternative contracting method, and in this case, a request for proposal or RFP contracting method. The team addressed 16 criteria to ensure that the RFP would not encourage favoritism nor discourage competition, and that the RFP would provide substantial benefits to the port and to the public. A public hearing was also, we had a public hearing on September 5th to address any comments or questions on this exemption, and we received no public comment. And here with me today is Alan Dekezian, Engineering Project Manager, who will present the agenda item.
Thank you very much, Stan. Good morning, Madam President and Commissioners. Nice to be with you all today. I haven't been here in several years, so I'm wondering where the mouse is. Is this the new control? Oh, really? You talked to ground control? Okay. Okay.
Next slide.
Next slide, please.
Yeah, there you go.
Wow. This is cool. I am here to present, as Stan mentioned, a request for the board to approve our findings and grant us an exemption from the requirement for competitive bidding. Next slide, please. A little bit of background on the project so you understand some of the nuts and bolts. The project we're working on here is our heating system. So we use hot water at about 180 degrees Fahrenheit to heat the terminal facility at PDX. The pipes that deliver that hot water to the various pieces of HVAC equipment, they're bolted together. As you see in the picture, the diagram, pieces of pipe are joined with a clamp and a gasket under that clamp. Over time, and with heat and with repeated cycling of changes in temperature, changes in pressure, those clamps and gaskets fatigue. When they fatigue, they create leaks. We've been fighting this problem at PDX since the Terminal Expansion South project in the early 2000s. The problem is going to get worse as we transition to our new all-electric ground source heat pump system. So rather than using steam to heat the hot water that heats the buildings, we're going to use electricity and heat pumps. That lower temperature creates a risk of even more failures of these joints and even more leaks. And when, of course, these pipes leak, we impact operations, we impact the facility. It's quite an impact on our daily operations. So next slide. So this project is going to focus primarily on Concourse C and the main terminal. It's also going to touch the north side of the facility. We did a similar project a few years ago. We left some areas behind on the north side because we felt that the TCOR project would be doing massive work. And so we didn't want to invest in remediating this piping in areas where we were going to be doing demo in the future. Now that TCOR's design is settled out, we realize we have to go back and tidy up a few things. Next slide, please. So the way this all happens, we start with the tunnel level. The hot water piping is very large, like 12-inch diameter down in the tunnel. It travels a utility tunnel under the entire facility, and then it goes up through shafts. We call those risers. The piping goes up through the building to the deplaning level, the endplaning level, and ultimately to the mezzanine, where the hot water is delivered to the equipment, the HVAC equipment. So we're going to be trying to minimize the impact to the facility. We can't just shut down and drain the entire heating system for Concourse C. We're going to do it in sections. So the first thing we have to do is install some special valves and some hoses so we can bypass areas that we're working on and keep the rest of the facility heated. We are also going to have to open up walls for the shafts. As I mentioned, the piping rises up through the building through shafts. Some of those walls have to be taken out. Overhead ceilings have to be taken out. This is all happening in occupied areas. This is all happening next to hold rooms or gates where our passengers are waiting for their flights, down on the deplaning level or the arrivals level, the back offices. So there's a lot of cutting of pipe with torches and then welding of pipe. It's very intrusive and it's very extensive, as you saw in the layout. One other thing with this project, since we are going to be working on the piping, we're taking the opportunity to upgrade some older components, control valves and temperature controllers that are just beyond their useful life. So that's also an aspect of the project. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we're going to be cutting the pipe with torches, cutting off the ends where those clamps are so that we can bring the pipe together and weld it. That's obviously a fire risk. We do this. We have very good processes in place. We call them hot work permits. The contractor is required to plan their work. But even with that, with the extent of the project, there's an elevated level of risk here. No matter how much safety control we apply to it, a lot of our concern on this project has to do with the training and the processes that our contractor will use to manage this work safely when we're not looking over their shoulder. The safety risks are not only property damage, but potentially injury as well. As I mentioned, we're going to be working overhead in occupied areas where the public is in close proximity. So we really have to have contractors that have the expertise, quality control, and safety plans, not only on paper, but in reality, that they make it happen. Next slide, please. So to get there, we analyzed as a team, the engineering department, our contracts and procurement department, and our legal staff. We analyzed options for alternatives to the traditional method, which Stan outlined, which is selecting a contractor solely based on their price, a low bid procurement. Under the code and with your approval, we can use an RFP, a request for proposal, so that we can understand each contractor, each proposer's capabilities, their qualifications, their expertise, their experience. Their cost will also be evaluated, as well as shared prosperity factors. So it's a more comprehensive approach to selecting a contractor. And the findings that are attached as Exhibit A to your minutes today, or your agenda today, excuse me, they detail those findings. And that's part of our ask today, is that you approve those findings and grant us the exemption. Next slide, please. The schedule of the project, you'll see with your approval today, would extend through 2024, 25, and into 26. We're allowing 2 summers for the work, summer of next year and the following year, just because of the uncertainty. We haven't seen the proposals yet. We haven't seen the contractor's plans and schedules yet. So we're allocating 2 summers. We think this work is achievable in 1 summer, but we wouldn't rush it. We want to make sure the work is done safely. Next slide, please. The construction contract is currently budgeted at $4 million. We have design fees at $350,000, $1.7 million of port staff and other services. We're carrying a fairly large contingency here, 30% of our total project budget. That's primarily because we haven't received pricing yet. So there's a big question mark on the construction cost. Once we get our proposals and we make a selection and we have a construction cost, we'll be able to reduce that contingency. Total project budget is just under $8.6 million. It will be funded by the Airline Cost Center. Interesting point on small business enterprise participation. We have an opportunity here to use maybe a little bit more competitive criteria in scoring these RFPs. Typically, we establish a goal in a low bid scenario, and the contractor either meets the goal that we establish or they don't. If they don't meet the goal, they have to explain why through demonstration of good faith efforts. But with an RFP, I feel, and other staff members feel, we're still hammering this out, there's an opportunity to make it a competitive selection. Let the proposers submit their own goal and let us score that. Let them earn the points in the RFP process by coming to us with a better small business goal. So that has yet to be determined. Next slide, please. I guess in closing, staff requests your approval of the executive director's recommendation. And I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you. One quick question. So the contract itself, once you determine who the successful applicant is, will come before the commission as well?
Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you for bringing that, Madam President. We anticipate in December. Once we get the RFP process complete, we would come back to you in December for approval of a contract. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Commissioner Lamb?
Thank you so much for walking us with the work that you do. I just do want to ask further about the contingency. So large, you explained 30% of it is just because the work that you have research about, but what is the rest of the contingency? Why is it still so large? Typically, we only set aside 25% or 30%, correct?
Well, yes, there's an evaluation we perform when we set the contingency in our budget. In this case, because there's so much labor in this project, there's not a lot of material. So in construction estimating, when you have a lot of material, it's easy to estimate, right? You go on Amazon, you find out what the material costs are, and those are predictable. This job is mostly labor. For a 20-foot section of pipe, we're shaving off a foot, and then we're welding it. So it's all labor. That's a very risky project, hard to estimate. That's why we have a higher contingency here.
I would also say that, most of the time when we're coming to the commission, when you see that budget slide, we already know what the contract price is because you're approving a contract. Normal in engineering practice that when you have a lot of unknowns still, your contingencies, you're going to set it a little higher. And what we do here at the port, once we get competitive pricing in-house and we're selected contractor, then we will go through what we call a gate review, and we'll shrink the contingency because we don't have as much risk anymore as to what the price is going to be for the work. So you'll generally see us in the 10 to 15% range for contingency when we are actually coming for approval of the final contract.
Great, thank you. And also, when you say open wall, is the ceiling inside or is it bottom ground floor?
It's all levels of the facility. So the deplaning, ground floor level, the end planing, and the mezzanine above, the shafts go all the way up through. So we'll be doing work on all the levels.
Well, that sounds exciting, but also I just want to be, us to be kind of, keep in mind a thought when we open the ground floor, make sure we have pet control vendor standby just in case we have any surprises, friends, visitors, the concourse pets. That's a thing that I just want to point it out from other airport. So,
yes, thank you. Good point. Yes.
Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, the Board of Commissioners will be in recess briefly. We will meet as the Port of Portland Contract Review Board, which I now call to order. So I ask you as the Portland Contract Review Board for a motion and second for approval of the findings, which were in Exhibit A of our materials in support of the exemption, and approval to exempt from competitive bidding the South Terminal Heating System upgrade.
So moved.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The motion carries. And I think you have the next item for us as well. I'm sorry, I will call the Portland Commission back to order.
Okay, this next agenda item is seeking your approval on several on-call consulting contracts for architectural services. The port has used the previous version of this on-call service over the past 6 years, and during that time, we had 3 firms. We issued 19 task orders underneath it for approximately $2.4 million in total. The contracts being considered today are part of the Shared Prosperity Through Contracting pilot process for on-call contracts. You may recall last May, we came to the commission for 3 very similar on-call contracts under this pilot program. It was for civil engineering services, rail services, and surveying. The pilot's purpose is to increase small business utilization and diversify the type of businesses receiving this work under the contracts. Associated with each task order, we will negotiate small business goals, and those goals will become part of the contractual requirement. For these contracts, we went through a request for proposal process, which we received and evaluated the proposals utilizing set criteria, including shared prosperity, qualifications of the provider, their project team that they proposed, project management, as well as their safety record. And here again, Alan will be presenting this agenda item.
Thank you, Stan. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah, so again, we're here today to ask for your approval of the Executive Director's recommendation to award 4 contracts for on-call architectural services to DBC Architecture, GBT Architects, MWA Architects, and Studio Petretti Architecture. Next slide, please. This on-call program we have, as Stan mentioned, with multiple different disciplines, looking today at specifically architectural. This pilot contract will have a term of 5 years. We will have options for extension beyond that at the discretion of our contracts and procurement manager. These contracts apply not only to engineering-driven projects, but any department at the Port of Portland can utilize these contracts. So it's kind of a high leverage use of our time here in putting these contracts in place. They get used by multiple different departments, planning department and operations, et cetera. What will happen with these on-call contracts is when a need arises, the project managers will approach a on-call architect. We have 4 of them proposed. We'll give them their scope. We'll work with them to define scope, schedule, and budget for a task order. That task order then is much simpler to execute and issue than a contract. So there are time savings here. By investing the time up front in establishing the contract and all the terms and conditions, The next step of actually getting a project going is a much simpler task. Well, it's a task order. For transparency, though, of course, since you're not seeing the contract every time we make an award, you will see the task orders. Every time we award a task order, that will be reported out to you in your monthly commission report. This process also, as Stan mentioned, was designed to expand our pool of small businesses, certified businesses. We made this a competitive factor. So as opposed to, again, providing a goal to the proposers and having them just meet that goal, we gave the proposers an opportunity to propose their own goal for the contract. And we got proposals ranging from our typical minimum of 20% all the way up to 50%. So we have architects now that are committed to delivering 50% of the work we award them through certified businesses. Each task order will have its own contractual limit, though. So the way this will work, if there's an architect that, say, proposed an overall 40% goal, that doesn't mean that every task order has to have a 40% goal. One might be 30, one might be 50, but their overall goal through the 5 years is to get to that number. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, many different departments can utilize this contract. There are lots of different types of services. When you think of an architect, you may think, but they design buildings. Well, they do a lot more than that. For an operation like ours, we use architects for master plans and developing our standards and many different functions, not simply designing the buildings. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, pending your approval of the contracts, we'll enter into 5-year contract terms with each of the 4 proposers with options for extension beyond that. Next slide, please. In conclusion, staff requests your approval of the executive director's recommendation to award these 4 contracts.
Thank you, Commissioner Luther.
Thank you. I am just curious whether there's a process for distribution of the work across the 4 architects and how you avoid lumping of the work in any one, or is there quality review or some kind of SLAs that are tracked to that help to know which projects are right for which architect? Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. The 4 architectural firms are a little bit different. There's some diversity there in their size and their expertise. And so I will be the contract administrator overall, and I'll play that role to help guide individual project managers towards an on-call firm that best suits their project. We do try to balance the workload. That's not to say that we guarantee any amount of work to any particular on-call consultant. You know, the way the contracts are written, they still have to stay in touch with us. They have to do some marketing. They have to come to us, and we assign the task orders to maximize the benefit to the port. And that's keeping all of them somewhat busy if we can. We don't want to overload one consultant and, you know, not utilize another, but there is discretion involved. And then there is tracking in terms of the small business performance. Our small business group will definitely be working with these consultants to track the results of their work in terms of small business participation. And then within the various departments, we all compare notes on the performance, the design performance, or, you know, how each task order completes.
Commissioner Luther, we've made it a practice to try and distribute as equally as we can. If someone has an on-call contract with us and they're not getting much work, the likelihood of them coming back and doing work for us shrinks. And so we really like to try and distribute the work so that this is of value to them and that they'll, you know, continue to want to have an on-call contract with the port. So, yeah.
Commissioner Sumput.
Yeah. Thanks for being here, and thanks for thinking through the kind of operational efficiencies of having a kind of on-call contract. Do you have an idea of what the overall spend might be over a 5-year contract period? And is each of the task orders subject to some kind of review, especially based on size?
Right. So, as I mentioned earlier, at least in the previous set of on-call architectural contracts, over the last 6 years, we had 19 task orders for a total of about 2.4 million. So if the future is anything like the past, we'll probably be, in the $2 to $3 million range by the time these contracts end.
And each task order is subject to the authority, the delegated authority rules. So at each level of our organization, we have an authority level. A $100,000 task order gets approved by one person, a $250,000 task order gets approved by a different person. So each task order still has to go through that rigor.
Yeah, again, thank you very much for the presentation. We've got some experience with sort of on-call services historically here. Is this the universe of architects who have been involved in that, or have you distilled that down to a specific set of individuals who you feel are best suited going forward?
We had 14 proposals. So the evaluation committee had to sort through 14, very qualified firms. But there were different factors that we evaluated, and these 4 firms were selected as having the highest scores. We scored multiple criteria. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, though.
No, you are. And I guess part of it is that we continue as an organization to evolve. And so looking forward, seeing, for example, how people align with our shared prosperity initiative in terms of their own business models. I mean,
absolutely.
Those are things that allow us to sort of decide on the greater and lesser of equals in making a decision like this.
Yeah, and I think some of the experience being that this is, part of this pilot program to improve shared prosperity. I did go back and look at the 3 agreements that you approved in May, and we've had 16 task orders underneath it so far. And some of that work is real specialty work, especially on the marine side, might be in water work where we don't have a lot of opportunity for small business, but the range has been upwards of 67% as far as some of these task orders for small business participation, with most of them are in the 20 to 30% range. There are a few that were 0, but so far it's proving to be, fairly successful as far as improving our small business participation.
Mm-hmm. Can I add one little anecdote, or do you folks need to run?
Well, I see that Commissioner Strader has a question, so if I could turn to him first.
Yeah, thank you. Have we worked with any of these firms previously? Do we have any background with them? Or are these all new firms that are new to the Port of Portland?
No, great question. DBC Architecture has held an on-call architecture contract with us, as has MWA. So both DBC and MWA are current holders of the previous architectural on-call. GBD has not, and Studio Petretti has not, but they have both done work at the port. And that was the anecdote I wanted to share, was that Studio Petretti is a small woman-owned firm. They applied, I think it was 6 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, for the previous architectural on-call, and they weren't selected. But Amanda Petretti came in to do a debrief. We talked about her proposal, her firm's proposal, what was strong, what could be stronger. We pointed out she didn't have any airport experience. We suggested that maybe she could team with other architects that are already working out here. And that's exactly what she did. She got some work through ZGF. She built up her airport portfolio. She persisted. She came back to us with this round of proposals, and she was successful. So we do look for airport experience, Port of Portland preferred, and we have ways of helping smaller firms get that experience.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's what we should be doing. It can be rather intimidating for people that are, especially smaller firms, try to get through the process. So my accolades to you for doing that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. We will move to a motion and second to approve the executive director's recommendation.
I so move.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
I'll call on Dan Pippinger to introduce the next agenda item.
Good morning again, Commissioners. Great to see you all here. This item is a request to approve a purchase and land sale agreement of about 5.5 acres, not needed for aviation use out in Hillsborough, adjacent to the airport to the city of Hillsborough. It's part of a number of transactions we're doing with the city to help with interchanges, clean up kind of land along the edge of the airport that's not needed that would benefit the community. And it will allow the city, in this case, to assemble land to build a public safety headquarters and training facility. So here to introduce the item and present it to you is Steve Winkle, Airside Real Estate Senior Manager.
Great. Thank you, Dan. Good morning, Commissioners. Again, Stephen Winkle, Aviation Real Estate Manager. Very excited to be here today. I haven't been to a live public commission process for a period of time, haven't presented.
But you're not looking for the mouse.
I'm not looking for the mouse. Yeah, I'm excited to bring this one before you guys today because it's a project that we've worked on for a couple of years, a lot of process involved with it. And I think it has a very good public community benefit out in the Hillsborough area. If we could go to the next slide, please. So the proposed commission action today is approval for the executive director to execute the proposed purchase and sale agreement conveying real estate interest to the city of Hillsborough that allows them to develop a new public safety facility and training facility adjacent to the Hillsborough Airport. Next slide, please. So I just want to present a little bit of background and some key terms associated with the transaction. First off, on the screen, we can see the proposed sale property, which is that triangular shape highlighted in yellow. And this property is not needed for aviation use. It doesn't have an aviation use currently, and it doesn't have one projected for it at any point in the future. How we determine that the property is not necessary for aviation use is through a master planning process, which we completed the last one of these at the Hillsborough Airport in 2019. That's a process where we do a very deep dive. It's a multi-year effort where we look at real estate facilities and put that against operations and projected growth. And it at the end spits out a report that says this is what we need in the future. And it also identifies things that we don't need as well. And this parcel is one of those pieces of property that we don't need. So how do we end up with aviation property that we don't need around the airport? I want to take a moment to just kind of dig into that a little bit because, as Dan mentioned, we will have probably some other transactions in the future that kind of follow the same narrative with being excess aviation property not needed for aviation use. So historically, what happens is we buy big chunks of property, and particularly out in the Hillsborough area, it's big farm-sized parcels, and we put that patchwork together as the ground necessary for the length of the runways, taxiways, airport operations space, and safety buffers, et cetera. And what ends up happening is obviously the property that we buy is, essentially mostly needed for the aviation operation, but what ends up happening at the periphery and the outer edges is that property is less necessary for the aviation use and sometimes not needed at all. This subject parcel follows that exact same pattern, which is it was purchased in the early 1970s, part of a much bigger real estate acquisition. And it was later bisected by Northeast 25th Avenue, which we can see it on the drawing, was what renders it with its sort of odd shape and size, which makes it not very attractive for other type of independent development on that parcel. It also bisects that. The roadway also bisects it and disconnects it from the airport itself, making it not very useful for aviation use as well. So we have this parcel because it's ours. We're required to maintain it. And we've been doing so with long-term land management agreements for approaching 5 decades now. But it's just we just have it. We do these land management agreements in order to just cost effectively maintain it. So again, not necessary for aviation use. In 2021, we were approached by the city of Hillsborough. They requested to purchase this property. Their idea was that they wanted to put this property together with the neighboring property that they were purchasing. And with those two combined, that gives them direct access to Northeast 25th. It gives them a developable area large enough to build out their proposed public safety facilities, as well as those two parcels are located geographic wise in the approximate area that they wanted to develop these new public safety facilities for the city. So I keep mentioning the public safety facilities. So in detail, I want to share what their concept is they're looking to build a new 2-story, 70,000 square foot police headquarters facility for the city of Hillsborough. So a very significant public asset right across the street from our airport. Neighboring would be a 43,000 square foot state-of-the-art training facility that would be utilized for police training, public engagement, and also some public use. When they approached us with that, we evaluated that against what we were doing in terms of the land management, and recognized that as a much more significant, better, and higher public use community benefit than what we were doing with it. So we, at that time, started to engage in the process necessary to value the 5.4 acre parcel and also begin the federal release process as necessary, which when we complete this federal process, which takes a bit of time and a bit of process, we're able to sell the property at the end of that process. So through a 3 appraiser effort, we valued the property, which I'll add that when you end up utilizing 3 appraisers, you end up with a very precise, very triangulated valuation that's highly defensible. If and when we close this sale, which could be as early as next month if approved today, that those proceeds would then flow to the port and then would be available for the port to reinvest in our airport, which is a strategic goal of ours, is financial self-sustainability of our airports. Let's see. I guess the last thing I would say about that is also the city agrees with the valuation of the property as evidenced by them signing the purchase and sale agreement prior to this presentation here today, which takes me to the conclusion. Next and final slide, please. Which is the executive director recommendation allowing execution of this proposed purchase and sale agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Luther.
Just for clarity, does that credit the airline cost center for the sale?
It does not. It's the
the
port
general
cost center.
Oh, the port cost center. Okay.
The general
fund.
There is a connection.
Okay. I just wanted to make clear where that the funds, because you were mentioning reinvestment in the airport. So I just wanted to be clear if there was a use of funds, use of proceeds in mind.
Reinvestment would be in the Hillsborough Airport, not in PDX.
Thank you, Commissioner Alexander.
Great presentation.
Thank you.
No, and particularly the history of why we're holding on to a non-producing asset. I mean, that was very helpful in sort of, because it does, as you said, it may have a bearing on future transactions where we begin to look at how we sort of stream down in the line. I'm pleased to know that there will also be that particular use, because having a police-based facility adjacent to the airport, I'm sure will allow us to benefit kind of concentric circles of benefit just from proximity. So good job.
Thank you.
Commissioner Sampat.
Again, I want to reflect the same thought, which is this is well presented so we can understand the history. Has this been through any review process within the city of Hillsborough, and what's the public sentiment there in terms of having a police facility and training facility? Is there positive sentiment? Is there mixed sentiment?
I would say that they have publicly announced this proposed development. They did so about a year ago. kind of a little bit at risk because we haven't yet transacted this property. They did not receive any negative feedback associated with that. And my understanding is that the community supports this.
Thank you.
Thank you. I will agree. Great presentation. I was going to ask how you'd arrived at the fair market value, and you answered that question. So thank you for that. We'll move to a motion and second to approve the recommendation. Do we have a motion? Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dan, I think you have our last agenda item.
For the last agenda item, it was interesting. We just talked about master plans and the one we completed in 2019 at Hillsborough. And as I think we've talked about before, we're headed into another master plan here at PDX, the last one being in 2011. So today's item is a request to approve an award for a personal services contract to Recondo and Associates, a consulting firm, for master plan consulting work for our work here at PDX. These plans are, you heard Steve talk a little bit about why we do them. It's also required by the FAA to do roughly every 10 years or so. We actually had a lot of internal robust conversation and pushed this plan out a couple of years since we were so deep into the PDX Next program, kind of had our hands full. But as we come out of that program, we need to have a clear vision on where we're going and what we need to be doing as far as airport development. So the only thing I'd also mention is that we will provide regular updates to Aviation Task Force and Commission as appropriate, and that Commissioner Luther has been assigned as the master plan liaison, and certainly she'll be getting a lot more involved and update from us as well. Here to put the recommendation before you is Aaron Ray, the Aviation Long Range Planning Senior Manager.
Thank you, Dan. Good morning, commissioners. It's a pleasure to be here today. As Dan mentioned, this has been a project a long time in coming, and we're excited to get underway with your approval today. Next slide. So the commission action in front of you is a recommendation from the executive director, as Dan mentioned, to award a personal services contract to Recondo and Associates for consulting services related to the PDX master plan update, and in the amount of approximately $7.3 million. Next slide. I wanted to share a little bit about the size and shape of an airport master plan for those of you who haven't been through one of these before. The FAA has a very detailed definition that we read and then we put aside because we use the master plan for a very specific purpose here at the port. The master plan is really a tool, a framework to guide development of the airport over the next 20 or so years. It's more of a decision framework rather than a specific map or book of decisions that we're going to undertake in that time. The intent with it is really to memorialize priorities that we hold as an organization and as a community for how this facility should grow and address demand over the next 20 or so years. The FAA does ask that we set these in motion every 10 years or so. As Dan mentioned, we're a little bit behind, but I think that is a credit to the prior master plan, which I'll explain a little bit of where we arrived in that process. The last airport master plan was in 2011. We commonly refer to it as Airport Futures, and I think it's worn very well. And you can see literally today under construction the outcomes of some of the planning decisions that we made in that prior plan. Next slide, please. So this illustration is, you've probably seen this before if you've dug into the prior master plan, but this is what we call the preferred alternative. It's sort of the overall schematic of if we were to build everything that we had in the plan, this is what PDX would look like. And I've called out a few examples to demonstrate how this works more as a framework than as a specific schematic of development that we have planned over the next few years. So I'll start with the centralized terminal complex, PDX Next. All of the construction work that we're doing and we've been doing over the past 5 to 7 years is grounded in airport futures and some of the priorities that came out of that planning process, where we were going to have a centralized terminal complex that would be walkable, where we're going to remove vehicle trips to the extent that we can on Airport Way and bring things like parking shuttles and all the rental car facilities closer in, and that we'll invest in a single point for our passengers to arrive at PDX, go through the processing in the ticket lobby and at security, and then get into the facility. So all of those things are being realized today. An example of where plans might have shifted, but we accomplished what we set out to do, would be the Remain overnight aircraft parking. So you can see that on the left side of the graphic. That we knew we needed to build. The ideal place at the time, based on the conditions that we were looking at, would be out kind of where we built the roof, over by the fire station. But as we got closer to implementing that project, talking with the airlines and understanding more about where they are with their operational needs, we ended up building it at the end of Concourse E. So you can see it as you're driving into the complex. And that's really responsive to airline preferences to have it on the same side of all of the runways as the terminal. So it changes, you don't have to have a pilot or somebody who's certified in the aircraft to taxi. It's a little bit of a shorter turn time to get a plane to and from the gate. So we were able to build the same thing, just in a slightly different spot. The same thing is true with our parking and rental car expansions. So the RCC and the Packer facility. Those were envisioned kind of where you see number 8 and number 11 on that graphic. And we did build those, but we brought them closer in. Again, we're reflecting on the priorities from the plan and the fact that we wanted to invest in a centralized terminal concept. And then if you look at the bottom of the graphic for AirTrans Center, the master plan left a lot of potential in that area for infill development. It required us a few years ago or it resulted, I should say, in a few years ago, where we refined the master plan and looked at what are the needs of the cargo providers here at PDX, or who might be coming to PDX. What do our facilities look like? How can we get the most out of what we have before we start building new? And if we did have to build new, what might that look like? So again, all in the context and the framework of the prior master plan. Next slide, please. So this is, I'm going to start this slide actually with the key scopes of work. For those of you that have been through an airport master plan in the past, these should look pretty familiar. This is, the list is pretty much the standard FAA guidebook approach to how you accomplish a master plan, deliverables that come through it. In our case, though, we are integrating some key themes into our long-range facility plans that really refine this scope to be responsive to both our needs here at PDX and in the region, and also our values as an organization as we continue down the path of our shared prosperity mission. So while the titles may look the same, when you dig into the actual deliverables of the scope, how we're approaching this work is actually quite different and led to the selection of the consulting firm that we ultimately chose, which I'll talk about in a moment. And another thing that we'll talk about a little bit more in depth is really our focus when we go to do community and stakeholder outreach. That is one aspect of this project that will touch basically the entire plan. We want this to be a plan that we develop with the community and with our airport stakeholders. And so we need to focus on groups that have been not historically at the table for projects like this. We started some of that work in the 2018 Hillsborough Master Plan. We had really good success with that, but that was just the beginning. And so we're really going to lean in on that. Next slide, please. So we believe that this is the first, or one of the first, airport master plans in the United States that will approach shared prosperity in such a deeply integrated way. I originally had this slide saying it was the first. I can't prove that, but I'm not aware of any other airport sponsor that's gone to take such an equitable economic development and shared prosperity lens that we're proposing to. Our consultant team, I'm really excited about in this space because we have some of the national thought leaders on how to apply an equity lens in aviation planning. That's a very early emerging aspect of our industry. There hasn't been a lot of work being done, so there aren't very many good examples for us to lean on. So we needed to bring in the experts to help us push our thinking beyond the traditional master planning process, and we're confident that we have the team that'll do that. We're also emphasizing resiliency and sustainability, and there are just a couple of examples up there of topics that we'll be going through in our facility evaluation, looking at ways that we can invest in seismic and climate resiliency, and also electrification and carbon reduction, not just in the facility that we have, but the facility that will ultimately develop over the next 20 years or so. There's a lot of work to be done to understand what is our electrical demand today and where is it going over the next 20 years and where is all that power going to come from? So we're really excited to dig in on that. On the right, I talked a little bit more about the community engagement strategies to ensure really broad engagement with a strategic focus on, again, communities that haven't been engaged, those who live or work at or near PDX, and those who are experiencing outsized impacts. I think that one of the first things we're going to do in this project, assuming approval from all of you, is look at where are the benefits and burdens at PDX, who's at the table and who's not, and how can we improve that engagement beyond where we've been. We're also going to, this will be our first major planning effort post-pandemic, so I think we'll be leveraging some of the lessons learned and engagement to our benefit here. So we will be doing traditional, quote unquote, traditional community engagement, but we'll be leaning in also to online engagement and everything that we can do to provide asynchronous opportunities and also a multilingual engagement we'll be investing in. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the budget is just shy of $7.3 million. It's paid for 75% with an FAA, a Federal Aviation Administration Airport Improvement Program grant, and then 25% from the Aviation Cost Center. Our small business goal in the request for proposals was 13.6%. Recondo's proposal places that at 25%. And I do want to point out that in the solicitation, it was a pretty competitive solicitation, and we ended up with a great problem of having some really qualified firms that could help us. But the reason that we ultimately chose Recondo is because of their approach to integrating shared prosperity into the work of the plan rather than having it just bolted onto the side. I think that was something that we decided early on was going to be very important to us, and it showed that they listened to that and created built a team and created a proposal that was responsive. Next slide, please. So with your approval today, we will begin work to build the stakeholder engagement plan and form a planning advisory group through the end of this quarter, or this year, I should say. And then the real public engagement and plan development work will begin in 2024. We anticipate this taking until 2026, where we'll be coming back to Commission for formal adoption. But as Dan mentioned, throughout the way, we'll be at Aviation Task Force. We had a great meeting this morning with Commissioner Luther, and we'll continue that periodically throughout. And again, all of you, there's an open invitation to please participate in any of the community events or engagement that we do out to the community. But yeah, we anticipate adoption here at Commission in 2026, and then beyond that, the final FAA approval. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, staff recommends approval of the executive director's recommendation. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
No question, just a comment for those of us, and I'm looking at Commissioner Alexander, who've been on the commission for a while. I will say it's really exciting to see the evolution of how the port is engaging in this kind of process, not just in the selection of who's going to help us with it, but how we're thinking about what the result of the plan is. And so I want to take that moment. It's I think, a huge leap, and I really appreciate it.
Thanks. That means a lot.
Commissioner Devon, please go ahead.
Yes, as a fairly new commissioner, could you give me an example of some of the non-traditional stakeholder engagement ways? You mentioned asynchronous, and just a couple of examples that might illuminate that for me.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I think that when we go to do, for instance, I'm just trying to think of one off the fly. When we think about different development alternatives, when we have, the graphic that I showed you a few slides back, there will ultimately be 3 or 4 of those. What we've typically done in the past is we've called a public meeting or two and put out great big maps for people to gather around and ride on. Planners love that, right? But we are beginning to think a little bit more about how we get input from people that either can't come to a meeting or may not speak English or may not have any idea of what they're looking at on this map, but they know that the airport impacts them every day. So one thing that we'll be doing is understanding what educational materials can we provide in advance so that people can come informed and ready to provide input based on their experience. We'll give them the opportunity to provide input on that graphic, maybe on their phone, on their computer, not just sitting around with a bunch of others around a table. And I think we'll also think more broadly about who we're engaging in that process. So a meeting at 8 o'clock at night is great for those of us that don't have kids or other opportunities. A meeting at 12 o'clock in the afternoon is great for those of us that don't have job commitments. We have to balance all of that. So we're going to think about how we convene, and do we do it? Maybe we do it a few times, or maybe we split it up into bite-size questions that we're getting feedback on, so that we're going to how the community wants to engage with us rather than expecting them to meet how it works most conveniently for the port. Did that sort of answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Welcome.
Any other questions? Commissioner Flynn, please.
Well, thank you so much. This is exciting work. But I just want to curious about how do we get our words out about these community outreach? How do we get that information out?
That's a great question. And that will be the very first thing that we'll be doing is that stakeholder engagement strategy and plan. One of the differentiators with the team that we selected is that we have a local public or community engagement specialty firm called Enviro Issues. They've worked with us in the past. They are on the team and will be running all of that. But we also have a DEI facilitator that will be working with them to make sure that we're contacting and engaging the communities that we need. I don't know the specific answer to that question, but I'm happy to provide more information to you once we have it.
I would love to learn.
Yeah, and I'd like to just add, we've, as the port, we have really bolstered our understanding of community, I think, with our Shared Prosperity Office. And I think, this isn't like the aviation team goes out and does this. We're thinking about how we leverage the entire port's expertise now, and particularly in the Shared Prosperity Office, and have them help us realize where that community is and how we can best engage with them. So not only have we changed our approach, I think, we have depth in the port now to really help us achieve what we want to do.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll ask for a motion and second to approve the recommendation.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And our meeting's adjourned.